Morning, y'all. Hey, Josh. Good morning. Yes, sir. No, you just have to give your webcam permissions. That's all you have to do. There's not a separate download for Respond as Monitor. Okay. All you have to do is when you go in, it'll ask you, do you want this to allow your webcam? And you say yes. And then, of course, you show your ID and take a picture and your environment and all that stuff. Okay. Good question. Thank you. Because I was a little bit confusing with y'all. Lockdown browser is a download. Okay. You download that from D2L. Okay. Respond as Monitor, not a program. All it is giving permission to your webcam to film you during the exam. Okay. Fair enough? All right, y'all. Well, I've got 8 o'clock on the nose, so welcome. Good morning. So I went online into GLO-BUS into my administrator's account, and I'm glad it looks like we've got about half of the class that decided to show up this morning. So we'll see how things go with regards to the decisions. But interestingly, I know you can't see this on the camera, Josh, but you guys can probably see the highlights that I have here. So I have 7 people highlighted on this list. I don't care if those 7 people are here or not. They're absent because they haven't yet registered for GLO-BUS. Okay? Part of being a good participant, a good teammate is you have to be prepared, and you got decisions due tonight at 11 o'clock. I know they're not prepared because they haven't even registered for GLO-BUS. Okay? So at any rate, just know that that's there. Okay? So in this case, kind of like on Monday when I gave people who had registered bonus points for having registered, it looks like people should have learned a lesson there, but since positive rewards didn't work, I'm going now with negative punishment, right? And if that doesn't ring a bell, maybe from your organizational behavior class, maybe from Bandura, right? B.F. Skinner, all that good stuff, all that psychology stuff. At any rate, enough about that. Y'all are here, and that's great. Come in. All right, so what I'm going to do today is you guys know that I have 2 companies set up in GLO-BUS, okay? One of those companies is in your industry. The other company is in the other industry, okay? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through every decision screen that's accessible to us right now. And I say that's accessible to us right now because special contract offers is only available starting in year 9. So I'll go through every decision screen except special contract offers, and I'm going to show you how to implement a specific strategy, okay? So because they're easiest to understand and the easiest to accomplish, I'm going to use both companies, okay? So starting in your industry, I'm going to implement a cost leadership strategy, okay? In the other industry, I'm going to implement a differentiation strategy, but my goal is to show you both of those strategies in play, okay? So just so you know, I got a few folks asking me questions last night via text message, which is always fine until I go to sleep. It's not so nice. But I got a few folks asking me questions last night about whether or not they had to have their decisions before we come to class this morning. Okay, let me clarify that. Okay, you do not have to have your decision before lab day, and we'll call these Wednesdays when we're meeting in here and making decisions lab day. Okay, but if you want me or Shakiba to help you, and you haven't made any decisions, then it's kind of hard for us to give you any recommendations, right? Okay, so that reminds me, I got an outsider. This is Shakiba Joseph. Shakiba, come over here on this side so folks in the live stream can see you and see what you look like. Shakiba is my graduate assistant, and he works on Mondays and Wednesdays. And he also works some other days, but he works specifically on Mondays and Wednesdays to help you guys. And he comes into work at 9 o'clock in the morning, although we're going to shift that up a little bit, and stays until 2, okay? So essentially, what does that mean for you? It means he's accessible for you outside of class from 9:30 to 12:30 on Mondays and Wednesdays, okay? And he'll be accessible to the other class as well from 9:30 to 12:30 on Mondays and Wednesdays. His role is to help you with GLO-BUS. He's the front line of defense. I typically don't get involved in him helping you with the decisions unless I hear something egregiously wrong, which hardly ever happens. Shakiba, tell them what you want them to know.
Okay, so like as students, I think you guys should probably listen and pay attention to detail, follow instructions, because you're going to need to do that, especially if you want to succeed in GLO-BUS. Is not going to be an easy road because there is a lot of competition, but I think mainly you should read the instructions set for you on GLO-BUS. I think that's that thing that they had to do.
The GLO-BUS Participants Guide,
Yeah.
as well as the help screens and the videos.
And that will help you with GLO-BUS because, trust me, it's not going to be an easy road.
Okay, all right. So essentially what Shakiba is saying there is what I hope that you guys have gotten from me talking. We're here to help, okay? My goal is not to take points away from you, ever. My goal is to give you every point that you earn, okay? So I've been doing this specific simulation. Makes 5.5 years now, at least 2 times a semester, sometimes 3 times a semester. And I've been coaching teams through it. So there's not much that I haven't seen, okay? So there's certain knowledge. This is actually Shakiba's 3rd semester as my graduate assistant because you fell out in spring because that happened. But you were fall, right? Okay, so it's his 2nd time. Okay. It's his 2nd semester as my graduate assistant, but we pay him a lot of money as a graduate assistant to help you guys, okay? So please take advantage of those opportunities with either one of us, okay? And you can also, if you're not comfortable coming into the office, we can do a Zoom call to give you guidance on your GLO-BUS decisions. I'm going to give Shakiba the Zoom link to the class, and you can text him and let him know that you want to meet, and we'll take care of that, okay? So before we jump in and implement the cost leadership strategy, I want to remind you this is from chapter 4, okay? It's an integrated set of actions taken to produce products with features that are acceptable to customers at the lowest cost relative to your competitors. You don't see anything in that definition of cost leadership that says anything about price, right? Do you see the word price in that definition? I don't even see it on that particular slide, okay? With cost leadership, you're selling typically standardized goods or services. It works really well with commodities, okay? But you do have to do something to make it a little bit distinct, competitive levels of differentiation. are the industry's most typical customers. Okay, so cost leadership, as is differentiation, is a broad strategy. So process innovations, which is newly designed production and distribution methods and techniques that allow the firm to operate more efficiently, are critical to your success. Okay, the cost leadership strategy, some of the tactics that you can engage in would be to build efficient scale facilities. In other words, you're trying to accomplish economies of scale. You need to tightly control your production cost and overhead. You need to minimize your cost of goods sold, research and development, and service cost. You need to build efficient manufacturing facilities, monitor cost of activities provided by outsiders, and simplify your production processes. Okay, make sense? You with me? All right, here's where the rubber hits the road. Here are the decisions. So keeping these things in mind, boy, I wish I had 2 screens. Okay, keeping these things in mind, I'm going to make some decisions. Let's start at the bottom. One of the ways that you can simplify your production process is by making fewer models. Right now, as I told you the other day, you're making 3 models of cameras and 2 models of drones. Okay, so this is just one thing that you can do, right? So if I drop from 3 to 2 models, my PQ rating increases from 4 stars to 4.2 stars. My costs really are not affected, right? My costs go from 154.73 down to 154.46. So that's not much of an effect, but what does get affected is I get a 5% increase in my PQ rating. On the drone, if I go from 2 models to 1 model, I get an even better increase from 4 stars to 4.3 stars. My costs basically remain the same. They go down by $4, okay? However, those decisions come with a little bit of risk. Right now, there's 8 competitors in the industry, including my company, including Company H, okay? 8 competitors. And that means on the cameras, with 8 competitors and 3 models for each competitor, there's 24 cameras on the shelf if a retailer is selling all the cameras, okay? If I delete a model, that means now there's 23 models on the shelf, but I only have 2 of those 23, okay? So I'm underrepresented. So it comes at a cost, right? And with the drones, there's 8 companies, 2 models. Right now there's 16, and I have 1/8 representation, 2 out of 16. But if I drop my number of models from 2 to 1, now I've got 15 models on the shelf, and I have 1/15 representation in the market, right? So you can see how that would be a little bit of a double-edged sword. It cuts both ways, right? There's positives and there's negatives. So here's what you need to understand with strategy. There's always going to be a trade-off, right? There's going to be a little bit of good and a little bit of bad that comes with every decision, okay? So that's one thing that you could do, okay? In addition, I'd like to share with you that these inputs that we put into our camera and into our drone obviously have varying costs, right? With regards to the top 4 inputs, we're deciding what specifications we want to put into our camera with regards to the image sensor, with regards to the size of the LCD display, with regards to the size of our image quality, and with regards to the size of how many photo modes we have, okay? So those are really kind of hard decisions, right? You can increase those, you can decrease those. Those things are relatively expensive. And right here, the top 4 lines on your projected camera cost correspond to those 4 lines. Make sense? Okay. The next 4 lines, okay? Housing, editing and sharing, accessories, and extra performance features, right? Those are, with the exception of the extra performance features, they're dollars, okay? In other words, you're making a commitment to put $8 per camera into the housing. If you choose to put less money into the housing, in effect, you're choosing a lesser quality camera housing, right? If you choose to increase your editing and sharing capabilities, you're spending more money and you're increasing the user's ability to edit and share their photos. If you increase the accessories, maybe you're putting a little longer USB or charging cord, right? Or maybe a carrying case, or maybe you're including a suction cup tripod mount. Okay, those are accessories that go with it, right? Okay. On the drone, it's not as apparent, but here's the point that I'd like to make to you. Okay, those things have differing costs, right? The inputs have differing costs, and they have differing effects. Okay, so if we think of those inputs on the camera and the drone as being our natural resources, aren't they our natural resources? Aren't they rooted in land, right? They're our inputs. Okay. Here's what we want to do, Carolina. We want to make it as efficiently as possible, and very simply, that is to say that we want the most bang for our buck for the natural resources that we're investing into our camera. Does that make sense? If we can make a 4-star camera more cheaply using a different mix of natural resources, shouldn't we desire to do that? As long as that's minimally acceptable to our customers. In other words, so long as there's not a great perception that your quality has been diminished because you're putting less money into something, right? Here's what I would say, okay? When you're 2724 by 2028 on your image quality, you've just made your resolution more than most TVs can display, okay? Do any of you have a 4K TV? A couple of you? But most of us, we're still stuck in 1080 land, right? Okay? So right now, with regards to image quality, we're spending $8. If we drop that down to 1920 by 1080, what have we done? We've cut $7 off of our cost, okay? But we dropped a tremendous amount on our PQ rating, okay? And the net effect of it is because our PQ rating goes down so much, our costs are even higher, okay? So all I did, watch this number right here, this image quality, and watch the total camera production cost, and watch the camera demand, okay? We were at 2704 by 2028, okay? Our PQ rating was 4 stars. Our image quality cost us $8. Our total cost was $154.73, and our demand was $899. Okay, y'all with me on that? I dropped that down to what most people can display on their TV. Because keep in mind, if I'm doing a cost leadership strategy, I'm actually targeting the budget-minded user. I'm not targeting a professional camera user, okay? So I might be okay with doing that. I might be okay with dropping the image sensor size. I might be okay with dropping the LCD display size. I've dropped my PQ rating all the way down to 3.2, and my costs have gone down only like $1, right? The problem is that customers are saying at 225, I don't want that 3.2 star camera, okay? So while my inputs have gone down, my applied overhead is going up. Accountants, raise your hands. Okay, what are we talking about here? We're talking about applying cost per unit, right? The fewer units we make, the higher the cost per unit. The more units we make, the lower cost per unit, okay? So if I can do something to get my PQ rating back up to 4 stars, and the customer doesn't perceive a difference, okay, what's happening? I'm gonna spread it over the same number of units, okay? So let's see.
Dr. Manley?
Yes, sir.
We can't see the screen you're changing numbers on.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
That's correct. I'm sharing the wrong screen. Thank you, Josh. Okay. So very simply, what I did is I went from an 11 millimeter image sensor to a 10 millimeter. I dropped my LCD display screen. I dropped my image quality. Okay. That dropped my PQ rating down to 3.2 stars. My costs really are unchanged. I mean, 154.56, I think, compared to 153.12. But the real problem is that my demand went down. Okay, so I'm spreading my overhead over fewer units. Okay, but if I take some of these components that give the sizzle, not the steak, okay, that give the sizzle and not the steak, and I increase those components such that I get back to a 4-star rating, okay? You see what happened there? My demand is back exactly where it was when I started, which is to say it's at 899,000 units, okay? And my costs are $4 cheaper. Does that make sense? Okay. In addition, going back to this PowerPoint, okay, when you're engaging in cost leadership, minimizing cost of sales, have we done that? I mean, we've got it down $4. Hopefully that makes a difference, right? Minimizing research and development. Okay, so we're spending $20 million on research and development, which equates to $22.25 for every unit that we sell, okay? So if I minimize research and development, right, that means 0. What happens when I put 0 in? I lose 0.1 stars on my PQ rating. It drops from 4 down to 3.9. Josh, am I sharing the right screen? Yes, okay. Right, so my PQ rating drops 0.1 stars, okay? But my price drops an additional $21, okay? So perhaps minimizing my research and development costs doesn't mean that I absolutely do away with research and development, but perhaps I cut research and development to an acceptable level, because nowhere in here will you find that research and development isn't important, right? Research and development is still important, but you want to put as little in the research and development as you can get by with. Okay, research and development is one of those things that has a long-term effect, right? It helps you to make cameras more efficiently and more cheaply in the future, okay? So if you cut out research and development completely, it's going to help you today, but Lexi, it's going to bite you in the rear end in the future, okay? It's going to really hurt you in the future. So what I'm proposed to you guys is, because research and development is important, but I need to minimize the cost, I'm going to drop that down to maybe $6 million, which gives me a 3.9 star rating. But if I put $1 more into my camera housing, I increased my housing. Now I'm back at a 4-star. That makes sense? And I've cut my cost down to $136.21. So effectively, I cut 14, 15 bucks off my cost there. Right? Are you with me? You understand? Questions about those decisions? Josh, I know you couldn't see them initially. Are you good?
Yeah, I'm good. So my question is like doing all that stuff and having doing the price leadership method. How are you dealing with the demand for that? Because there's like way too much demand. It's like overtime and everything if you have that cheap of a product.
That's a great question. Let me first correct you, okay? It's not price leadership. Never, ever.
Cost leadership, sorry.
Right. Cost leadership, okay? Pricing is a tactic that may be part of your strategy, okay? How do I deal with it? Well, I'm working some overtime to meet my demand, right? Remember last year we sold 840,000 units? Okay. That's what it says in our GLO-BUS participants guide. And I've got sufficient capacity with overtime. So I'm going to address that in two ways, Josh. Okay. First thing I got to do is adjust my marketing decisions to see how much demand I can actually generate for that product. And in addition, I also have to address my operations management. Remember, we're talking about optimizing land, labor, and capital, okay? So when I get over to my operations decisions, I have the opportunity there to put more money into my people to make them more productive, right? Shouldn't we optimize that resource as well? And shouldn't we fix our factory such that it's as efficient as possible? Right? So we need to fix our people, right? That doesn't mean we take them to the vet. We fix our people part of the equation and we fix our factory part of the equation. And I'll get there, okay? The first thing, though, that you have to decide is what's my strategy and what does it look like, right? And if I'm running a cost leadership strategy, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to get a cost advantage. So I want to make my product using the cheapest amount of raw materials that I can to get acceptable quality. And all I did is I changed the mix of my inputs so that I could get my cost down. Does that make sense? Okay. Now on the drone, okay, on the drone, here's what you should know. The drone is the future of your company, okay? Remember, for the first 3 years that your company was in business, you only made cameras. In year 4, you started making drones. Why did you make that decision? Or why did your predecessors make that decision? It's vertical integration, right? We're moving down the supply chain. We're becoming our own customer. But also, we believe that that's the future of the company, right? So let's just take one of those decision points, research and development. If I believe that drones are the future of my company, rather than cameras, where should I put my research and development dollars? Right, that's where you'd put it in drones. Okay, so I put my mask on, right, to do my little walking thing. I'll remember that. Strategy has to be first intentional, right? Am I picking a strategy and trying to craft products that fit that? Okay. Consistent, I'll address that in just a moment, and logical, okay? And I just asked y'all a logic question, and you passed, right? The logic question is, if drones are the future of my company, should I put more money into research and development on drones? You betcha, okay? Let me address the consistency question, okay? I'm making a 4-star camera. And they make this clear. You guys will know this. The people that aren't here will not know this. Okay? You're your own customer. Okay? You're buying product from yourself. And you're making a conscious decision when you put that product into a drone of what you want that product to look like. Because you're your customer, you can actually spec that thing out. Okay? You can say, I'll just take my basic model, you know, my best model here, and I'll put it into the drone without any changes, without any upgrades, okay? Or you can do a minor upgrade, a significant upgrade, or a major upgrade, okay? If you do no upgrade, I want you to notice right here that the cost of the built-in camera in the drone is exactly your production cost. You see, 136.21, 136.21. Now, I can't tell you definitively that if I do a minor upgrade, that I'm making that 4-star camera into a 4.5-star camera, but I'm just going to apply a little logic to you. If I do a minor upgrade on that camera, let's say that's a 10% improvement. Sound logical? So I'm making that 4-star camera into a 4.4-star camera to put it into my drone. Does that have an effect on my PQ rating? Obviously it does, because when I went back to the basic 4-star camera, Now I've got a 3.8 star drone. Okay. If I do a significant upgrade, let's say that that's a 20% upgrade. I'm taking my 4-star camera and I'm making it a 4.8 star camera. Does it make sense to you guys to put a 4.8 star camera into a 4-star drone? It really doesn't. And here's where you can really mess up, right? Let's say we get a 30% increase, we do that major upgrade. Now we've got a 5.2 star camera, and we're putting that into a 4-star drone. Does that make sense? That really doesn't make sense. You see how it's inconsistent and illogical, right? It just doesn't match. Okay. Now, if you were seeking to do a cost leadership strategy on one of your products and integrated cost leadership or integrated differentiation strategy, in other words, best value on the other products, okay, then maybe you can get by with that. But if you're going to make a 4-star product, both of them 4-star, you want to do it as cheaply as you possibly can. And you don't want to, this is acceptable, okay, to do a 4-star and then upgrade this and make it 5.2. But here's where it really wouldn't make sense. What if you were running a differentiation strategy on your camera and a cost leadership strategy on your drone? That would look like maybe a 5-star camera and a 4-star drone, right? So your camera is much better than your drone. Would that be consistent and logical? No, it wouldn't, okay? So in this case, let me also share this with you, okay? Right now, our cost on the drone are at $749.30, and that's 3.8 stars. If I do a minor upgrade, my costs go up to $757, okay? From $749 to $757. So my costs only go up by $8, okay? But my PQ rating, again, goes up by about 5% when I do that. So I'm doing double speak here, right? I'm speaking with a forked tongue. Doing an upgrade to your camera is a very, very cost-effective way to increase the quality of your drone. But you don't want to sell a drone that doesn't make sense, okay? You don't want to sell a drone with a 6-star camera and it's a 4-star quality drone, because what's going to happen? People are going to crash the drone and they're going to tear up the camera when they crash it, okay? So in this case, I'm going to leave that with a minor upgrade, okay? I'm going to downgrade my frame to high-strength plastic, okay? I'm going to leave my obstacle sensors where they are, with just front and rear obstacle sensors. I'm going to make it perhaps an octocopter with 8 rotors. And I'm going to upgrade my flight time. Okay, so you get to decide what you want to do and what it looks like, okay? Camera stabilization, basic. You do whatever you decide to do. Again, your goal is to make it as cost effectively as possible, right? So a minor upgrade, 12 minutes, 6 rotors with fiberglass, that's as cheaply as you can make it, right? But because that's the future of your company, right, and it's the highest growth portion of the industry, you get to decide what it looks like. And if you can get a cost advantage, you need to take it, okay? So perhaps I drop down to 1 model, right? And I increase my flight time and my rotors, and I downgrade from fiberglass to plastic, okay? And I downgrade stabilization to basic, okay? And whatever. You design the thing how you want to design it, okay? So what I've done here is I made a 4.4 star. I've increased my PQ rating by 10%. okay? I've increased my cost by about $40. But if I can get more demand, I may still be able to be the cost leader, right? Because it's about controlling cost. Now, in this case, because I'm doing cost leadership, I want to test this research and development to see if it's being effective for us, right? On this drone, I can actually eliminate all of my research and development and still have a 4.4-star rating. But that would be kind of, if you looked in the dictionary for one of Manley's bad sayings, that would be like cutting off your nose to spite your face, right? So maybe I just want to optimize that, right? And what I've done here effectively is I've pretty much kept my costs the same, but I've increased my PQ rating by 10%, okay? And if I can keep my price the same, maybe that's a strategy that looks kind of like not cost leadership, but integrated cost leadership, right? A best value strategy, okay? So we just have to see what it looks like. With regards to camera marketing, just to show you that price is not a part of a cost leadership strategy, I'm not touching price, okay? I'm not changing. What I'm going to do, however, is I'm going to promote this thing better. So I'm going to increase the number of discounts that I have and the percentage of my discount. If you read the participants guide and the help screens, it will tell you very specifically that a 10% discount does not do you any good, okay? So just looking at the help screen, right? These are actually extracted from the participants guide, okay? And if you look at sales promotions, okay, sales promotions and discounts, let me share. Okay, Josh is on the right screen, okay? Right here, it says sales promotions and promote. Promotional campaigns achieving sales prices of 15 to 20% off the regular price have substantially greater sales enhancing impact than promotions only offering 5 or 10% discount, even if a company holds more weekly sales promotions with such small discounts. Okay, what does that tell you? Read between the lines. What should it tell you? That 10% discount you were given ain't doing squat, okay? All right, so I would like to now address the money that I spent. Remember, on my strategic management continuum down here on this end, okay, cost leadership, it's a high volume, relatively low margin strategy, okay? So I need to get my marketing up so that I can increase my sales. And here's what I'm going to do, y'all. I'm a very logical person, and I'm changing these numbers, and I'll tell you how I'm changing them after I do so. Okay, so with regards to our advertising budget, we're making a decision here on how many thousands of dollars we want to spend, okay? So what I did was I increased my advertising budget in North America to 3,000, right? That's $3 million. But I did that very intentionally because I've got 3,000 local retail shops. I just picked something up there and I said, I've got 3,000 local retail shops. If I spend $1,000 per retailer, how much money am I going to spend on marketing? Right, it's $3 million, right? 3,000 times 1,000 is $3 million. And I did the same thing here. I've got 2,500 local shops, so I spent 2.5 million. See, it's the same equation, right? That's kind of like the definition of a broad strategy, Taylor, right? I'm doing the same thing in both markets with regards to the dollars, okay? 2,000 camera shops, I spent 2 million. 1,000 camera shops, 1 million. Now, if you don't want to use local camera shops, if you prefer to look at the number of multi-store chains, right? It's not going to be terribly different. If you spend, let's say, $10,000 per multi-store chain, you could spend 3.6 million there if you want to, right? Here you'd spend 3 million, here you'd spend 2.4 million, and here you'd spend 1.8 million. But if you wanted to pick a number like $700 per chain or $7,000 per chain, you can do that too. All I'm doing is I'm picking a reference point and I'm being consistent in all 4 of my geographic markets. Okay. Now, with regards to the website displays, I'm spending $500 per retailer. If I spend $1,000 per retailer for advertising and $500 per retailer for website displays, that's half as much money, right? Okay. However, over here you might say, hey, Dr. Manley, that's not $500 per retailer, because $500 per retailer would be $500,000. And you would be exactly correct. However, last year I spent $600,000 in that market, and I'm not about to cut my spend. Right? If I cut my advertising spend, what would I expect sales to do? To go down. Okay? So I kept it the same, and I know that this is going to catch up. Okay? But I'm just being very consistent, right? I picked my strategy. It's cost leadership. Okay? What do I know as part of cost leadership? Got to get market share, right? So if I do these things, my market share is going to increase from 12.5% to 13.1, 12.5 to 14.1, 12.5 to 13.6, 12.5 to 13.3, right? So am I gaining market share? Now those are projections. And what do those projections assume? They assume that y'all don't do anything any different. Matt?
Yeah, but let's look at the average wholesale price. I don't know if I'm trying to pay attention. Would you have to put in this, like, there's a lot of rules with the EU. Would you have to change your wholesale price? Would that affect it? Or is it
Absolutely. So if you'll look at the participants guide, there's like 11 factors that affect demand on the camera, and like 9 factors that affect demand on the drone. Okay? And each market is a little bit different. You'll see down here, right, that you've got delivery costs, which include shipping and import duties. Now, since we're an American company, right, or since we have very little import duties, but Europe, Africa has different import duties. Asia Pacific, even though we're making them in Taiwan, right? See how it's different? And Latin America has the same. Now, right now, let me go ahead and address something else. Right now, we do not have exchange rate impacts. Okay? So exchange rates are not a concern. But starting next year, you will have fluctuations in the exchange rate. Okay? And as your dollars fly around the globe, you gain money sometimes and you lose money sometimes, and you need to make price adjustments based on what you're gaining or losing. So in other words, if you gain money on exchange rates, you could sell your product for a lower price. If you lose money on exchange rates, you'd need to sell your product for a higher price. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So GLO-BUS tells us what our net revenues are going to be, what our operating profit's going to be in each market, okay? And I'm going to leave that alone for now, okay? Down here at the bottom, these competitive assumptions, please don't mess with those during the practice rounds. And honestly, please don't mess with those until you're very, very, very confident in your ability to implement your own strategy, okay? Because when we make competitive assumptions, what we're trying to do is we're trying to predict what the industry is going to do, right? With me? And if you haven't yet mastered the art of implementing your own strategy, how in the world are you ever going to figure out what the industry's doing, right? Okay. So certainly until there's an established trend in the industry, and you look at the industry reports, then you might want to make some adjustments, right? But that's the point at which you're very, very good and very confident in your ability to implement your own strategy. Because what this does is help you to fine-tune your projections. Okay? All right. With regards to drone marketing, I'm going to do the same thing. Okay? I've increased my PQ rating, but I'm really not trying for a cost leadership strategy. I'm really trying for an integrated cost leadership strategy. Okay? I want to have average selling price above average quality. Okay? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to raise my price because I want a very broad strategy. Okay? I want a very broad strategy. Okay? So I'm selling for the exact same price in all 4 markets. Okay? The drones are sold differently than the cameras. Okay? The cameras purely are B2B, business to business, right? Mac said it, you guys may or may not have caught it. It is wholesale price. When you set the price, you're setting the wholesale price. Here, you're setting the retail price. Okay? Now you've got a B2B model and a B2C model because you sell those products through third-party retailers. Okay, those are companies that sell your product online, but essentially you drop ship the product. Okay, with me? So they have to sell it for whatever you say the retail price is. What's in it for them? Whatever discount you give them for handling the transaction. Okay. Right now, you're saying for my third-party retailers, I'll give you a 15% discount. You handle all my transactions online. Okay. Now, in addition, you're selling that camera yourself, direct to consumer. All right, let's go to a marketing class. Lexi, you're marketing, right? Okay. Did y'all talk about channel conflict? What's channel conflict? It's when you're doing something that directly competes with your customer, right? You're selling it through third-party retailers. And if you were to sell your product cheaper than your third-party retailers can sell their product, they wouldn't be happy, right? Okay. I'll give you an example of that. A real live example. Any of y'all familiar with the Big Green Egg line of charcoal Kamado style cookers? Y'all familiar with those? Zach and Brian? Okay. Big Green Egg has a rule. If anybody sells that product for less than retail price, they pull the dealer agreement. Okay. You can't sell it online for less. You can't say I'm a volume retailer. They want a completely level playing field for all of their retailers. Okay. And why do they do that? I mean, you're talking about a little tiny smoker, tabletop smoker here that costs $7.99, right? Or you might be talking about a big one that costs $2,000. What kind of pricing model is that? It's a premium pricing model, right? But I can buy a Weber for $39.99 at Home Depot. Weber customers aren't Big Green Egg customers. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to apply that same model. I've got 36 online retailers, and I'm going to spend $1,000 for every retailer on website display advertising and search engine marketing. Okay? So I'm increasing my marketing spend. And you could do 500 for each if you wanted to. You get to decide what your marketing strategy looks like, okay? But here's the deal. The assumption is that your marketing is effective, right? You don't get to control the quality of your campaign. The assumption is if you spend money, that your campaign is effective, right? You're getting something in return for it, okay? Now, part of having these third-party retailers is not only do you compensate them when they sell your product, but you also have to spend money to attract them and support them, okay? So what attracts them? Retailer recruiting dollars, your retailer support budget, as well as the money that they can make when they sell your product, right? So if I want to push more product, there's a couple of things that I could do. I could increase the discount that I give them, right? Increase their commission, as it were. And I could also increase the support and attraction budget, right? Last year, we spent $80 in every market on every retailer, or for every product we sold, we spent $80, okay? So I'm going to increase my retailer support budget from 15% to 16%, okay? That's my discount. I'm going to increase my retailer support budget because now I'm selling more product. So I'm deciding how many dollars I'd like to spend, right, for retailer recruitment. A real easy way to do this is to look at your third-party demand, right? And I'm going to say, because last year the industry spent $80, I'm trying to get a high volume deal going here. I'm going to spend $100 per unit, okay? So since I know that third-party demand is 21,900 units, if I come in here and spend $2.19 million, okay, hypothetically, I should be at $100 per unit. But you see what happened? When I increase my spend here per unit, my demand jumped tremendously, right? So now I'm selling 27,400 units, not 21,900. So I have to keep increasing that until I get to where I want to be, okay? So I'm going to go to 2.8 million. See how that increased my demand to 30,100? I'm going to go to 3,100 or 33.1 million, okay? Okay. All right, so I'm going to do that in all of my markets. I don't know what happened there, but at any rate, I'm doing it in the EA retailer recruitment. I got an error message. I don't know what that's about. And Josh is in the way, so I can't see what it was about. All right, so what I want to do is to increase my spend here, okay, until I'm at about $100 per unit. Okay, and that's roughly $100 per unit because you're hitting a moving target here, right? The deal with this is the more I spend, the more my demand goes up. But we're also assuming when we do that, right? We're assuming when we do that, that everybody else is going to do the same. So I'm just budgeting dollars here, right? I'm budgeting dollars. And my demand obviously is going to be a little bit different. So I want to just get it as close as I possibly can to $100 per unit, but know at the end of the year, it's not going to be $100 per unit. No matter how well I make those numbers come out to $100 per unit, okay? No matter how well I try to do that, It's not going to work for me that way. Okay? But I did that, and if my demand is more than I anticipate, my dollars per unit is going to be less. Make sense? If my demand is less than I anticipate, my dollars per unit are going to be more because I'm directing myself here to spend $730,000. And that's $100 per unit, assuming that we sell 8,700. Okay? All right. And you guys who are smart finance people might say, but Dr. Manley, there's a problem. You're losing money in Latin America. Okay? Remember what I did. I raised the price. Okay? I also increased my cost. But what am I trying to do? I'm trying to get my costs down as low as possible. It's a volume strategy. And remember, strategy is about trade-offs, perhaps making a short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain. Okay? So vis-a-vis Amazon, right? How many years did Amazon lose money before they finally turned a profit? Okay, but that was related to their competitive advantage. All right, so, and there's another issue here, y'all. I'm losing money, but I haven't yet made the darn product, okay? So I have to go to compensation and facilities. And it's hit me, I'm not gonna cover all these screens, so I'll make you a deal. I'll upload this video to Zoom, to YouTube, and share the link with y'all. But in my 1230 class, I'll do differentiation strategy. I'll upload that to YouTube and share that with y'all. So even though you don't see me implementing the differentiation strategy, you'll have access to the video. Make sense? Fair enough? Okay. All right, so now we need to do compensation and facilities. And here's the reason that we're losing money on those units, okay? GLO-BUS tells us, because I've done so much to increase demand to try to get market share, remember, high volume, low margin. Margins don't get much lower than losing money on everyone you sell, right? I'm going to lose 34,700 units of sales because I can't possibly make them, okay? So first thing we need to do, y'all remember I told you there's some non-optional stuff here. Your workers expect a 2% raise every year, so I'm going to give them a 2% raise. Guess what? Just by giving these workers a 2% raise, I picked up an additional 1,000 units of productivity. It went from a 34,700 shortfall to a 33,700 shortfall. Okay. In addition, some other non-optional stuff is I have a hole in my factory. Remember that term, okay? I have a hole in my factory, and Mac correctly nailed that hole as kind of like a black hole. What I really mean is I've got this factory. Think of your factory as a cube. I'm only going to make it two-dimensional rather than three-dimensional, okay? Because, you know, whiteboard. You've got all these workstations in here, but you have this portion of your factory where there's no workstation. There's nothing installed there, okay? In other words, you've got room in there for workstations, but you don't have them. You have a hole, okay? And what happens to that hole? If I've got a production process that everybody's bumping up against one another, right? And I'm paying you an incentive pay, which a part of what we do here is incentive, because there's an assembly quality incentive that says, for every unit that you make, I'll give you $2.40. Okay? And what do you do? As long as you can do it. You keep making stuff, right? Because you want your incentive. And where does that product go? Even though Brian's workstation might be stacked to the ceiling with work in process, waiting on him, what are you doing? You're putting it in the hole. you're putting pallets worth of your product here. In other words, your factory is really inefficient. Your carrying costs of your inventory go up. Your shrinkage goes up, because what happens to inventory that's stored for a long time? It's taking up space, but that inventory can also, we can expect a portion of that inventory to become obsolete. Okay? So I fill the holes in my factory. Okay? There's another option down here. I can do a robotics upgrade. So I want you to think of every workstation as looking like this, okay? You got 4 workers around a workstation, okay? If I do a robotics upgrade, I send one of those workers home and I install a robot, okay? That's supposed to be a robot, okay? That looks more like a turtle, but I'm sending one worker home from every workstation and putting in a robot, okay? If I do that upgrade. So will that get my direct labor cost per unit down? Well, let's see. Right now, my direct labor cost per unit is $34.99. If I do an upgrade, my direct labor cost went down from $34.99 to $26.92. Now, of course, I've got the cost of the robots, and the presumption is I've got to borrow money to do that capital upgrade, right? So you have an assumption here of how you want to pay for it. And even though debt is always cheaper than equity, you don't want to be over leveraged. You want to have some down payment, some skin in the game for these robots. So we're going to finance 75% of their cost. Means we'll pay 25% of their cost, but we're going to do it on a long-term loan. Okay. So here's the deal with that. Zach, would you ever buy a house on a credit card? You wouldn't, right? Wouldn't buy a car on a credit card. Why? Because a credit card is a current liability. What's a car or a house? It's a long-term asset or capital asset or fixed asset, right? You pick the term you want to use. So you match the life of the loan to the life of the asset that you're acquiring with the asset. That's just a good rule for life, right? I'm going to go a step further. Unless there's a real good credit card rewards program and you're able to pay your credit card off every month, you shouldn't finance your lunch on a credit card. Because guess what your lunch is going to be tomorrow morning? 3 times. It's going to be a turd, and you're going to be paying for it in 45 days, right? And if you don't pay off your credit card every month, you might be paying for it 5 freaking years from now, right? Talk about financing a turd. Okay, don't want to do that. That's just life, y'all. That's common sense. That's life, okay? So we're going to do the robotics upgrade in both of our factories. And what I'm doing here is I might be sending some workers home, okay? So I'm sending home, I've got 280 workstations, I'm sending home 280 workers. But because I put in 20 additional workstations, I'm hiring back 60 of them immediately. Because remember, I'm putting in a workstation. That means for every workstation I have, I've got to hire 3 people, plus buy a robot. You with me? Okay. And in addition, from operations management, you guys should remember, right? You should remember that you don't want to run your factory at 100 and we're running about 110% here, right? Our capacity without overtime is 902,000 units. Our demand, okay, is 987,000 units. So roughly 85,000 more units than we have capacity for without working overtime. Now we can work overtime. If you work maximum overtime, you can get 1,082 units. But what happens when we get overtime? Labor costs go up. What else? You remember who was trailing the pack of scouts? What was his name? What is Herbie? Herbie's a bottleneck. He's a restraint. Okay, so think about, you know, the Herbies. Think about the theory of constraints. Oh, there you go with that crazy theory crap again, right? The theory of constraints. Okay. Your output, the maximum output in your factory is defined by the resource that can produce the least. Okay? Remember that. So how should you run your factory? According to the theory of constraints, you need to have some excess capacity. Excess capacity means I'm going to run my factory about 85%. I got 15% slack. Okay? Does that mean that I got 15% of my workers sitting around at any given time? Not necessarily, right? But we can run our factory much more efficiently if we're not making everybody work overtime. So I'm going to drop my overtime by increasing my number of workstations. So I want to have roughly 11 or 1.1 million units of capacity. So let's say that means I put in 30 workstations, okay? Now all I did there, I put in 30 spaces, okay? So first thing I've done is I filled up this, right? This all has workstations in it now. But when I put in 30 spaces, I do an expansion. And since I've done an expansion, I dang well better put workstations in it, right? Because if I do an expansion and don't put workstations in it, what have I just created? Another hole. Thank you, Taylor. Right? So now I've got to put in 30 spaces and 50 stations because I have to fill that hole plus I have to fill my expansion. But all I've really done there is I've matched my capacity to my demand. In other words, I don't have any excess capacity, right? So maybe what I want to do is do 60 spaces and 80 workstations. And when I do that, now I have capacity for 1,083, which is actually 1,083,000, and my demand is 987. Okay. Now, in my camera factory, having excess demand worked for me because I could actually work overtime and make those products. But over here, I got stockouts, and stockouts are a very bad thing because this 15,700 units that you just lost sales on, a little quick math on that, 15,700 times $1,100 per unit means that we just lost $17 million worth of sales. See where that's coming from? We're losing sales, unsatisfied demand, and our average selling price is $1,100. Okay? So we definitely need to fix that. So we're going to come in here and we're going to do 40 workstation spaces and 50 workstations. Now I've just got a little bit of excess capacity. I got about 11,300 units of excess capacity, which means I'm working my factory at about 95%. Okay. Here's an opportunity for you to hedge your bets. How confident are you in your decision? Right? How confident are you in the decision that you made that you're going to actually generate 215,700 units of demand? Right? Now you've got other options in here that I'm not going to take the time to show you, but I'm going to leave it right there. Okay. I'm doing the robotics upgrade in both of my factories. I've got some excess capacity in both of my factories. Okay. I want to go back to this PowerPoint for just one moment. Okay. Remember what we said, okay? Tightly controlling production costs and overhead, minimizing cost of sales, R&D, and service, building efficient manufacturing facilities, okay? What we need to do. So is there anything else in GLO-BUS that I can do to accomplish that? How about productivity improvement training? I want you to watch something for me here, folks, okay? Right now, I'm spending $1,000 per team on productivity improvement training. Watch what happens to my net profit when I increase my productivity improvement training. It's 44 million. I spent $500 more per team, and I've got 360 teams, and my profit only went down a tiny bit, right? Okay. So in the spirit of continuous improvement, right? We were spending $1,000 per team. We want to increase that such that our workers get better. And this is one of those cumulative expenditures, okay? Cumulative meaning that it's going to help you over time, all right? Got to move along to corporate citizenship. Okay, remember I'm playing a high volume strategy, which means that my image rating is going to be above average because I've got above average volume. You see my image rating is 77. Last year it was 70. That's because I've got high volume. But there's some stuff here that I can do that increases my productivity that directly affects my manufacturing environment. If I put in this cafeteria and on-site daycare for my employees, I spend $2.5 million and I generate a little overhead, $600,000 annually, but I get productivity improvements of 100 units per team in my camera factory and 50 units per team in my drone factory. In other words, by making the decision to spend $2.5 million plus $600,000, that's 3.1 million, I actually increased my net profit by spending money because I increased the productivity of my workers when I did that. Same thing with the safety, okay? I spent $3 million plus $500,000 on overhead, so $3.5 million, and my profit went up again, okay? And remember the other thing that we need to do, we need to monitor our suppliers' conduct, okay? Now that cost us money, but it's going to give us a long-term reward, okay? Since I did something on this screen that directly affected the productivity of my workers, should I go back and revisit my workforce and operations screen, my compensation and facilities? Remember, I increased my productivity here, so my capacity's up, right? But I had just expanded my factory. Now I need to go back and make sure that I didn't expand my factory too much. Okay? And those are one-time adjustments. But if I go back to compensation and facilities, now my assembly capacity is about 1.15 million, 1,157,000. And my demand is 987, okay? So I'm at about that 80 to 85% of capacity, right? Over here, my capacity is 235, so I'm at about 90% of capacity. So I'm okay with those decisions. But it could be that you do something there that makes you need to downsize your expansion, right? But at the very minimal, you want to make darn sure that you, at the very minimum, fill the hole. Okay? Even if you're running a differentiation strategy, fill the hole. Because by filling the hole, you're going to reduce your work in process inventory. And you're going to reduce your overhead because you're reducing your carrying costs. Okay? Last decision screen, because now we can't do special contracts. Okay, we've done corporate citizenship. By the way, by doing those corporate citizenship things, look what happened in my image rating. It went from 77 to 81. Cordell's over here saying, but Dr. Manley, your credit rating is a B minus. I'm gonna fix that too. Right now, the reason our credit rating is a B minus is I'm projecting to be overdrawn by $96 million at the end of the year, which I'm really not overdrawn. It just actually means that I have a zero bank balance because GLO-BUS is set up to automatically take a bank draft to cover your operating shortfall. I wind up with an emergency loan at 7.5% interest. And you don't want to do that, right? You don't want to do that because what you're doing is you're telling your banker that you don't know how to manage your money. Okay? So there's some stuff that I need to do here. Remember, folks, I want my stock price to go up. Okay? I've never paid a dividend. I'm anticipating about a $2 earning per share. I'm going to set a policy that says I'm going to pay a 25% dividend. I'm going to pay 25% of my projected earnings for the next year. What's 25% of 221? Well, it's roughly 55 cents per share. Okay. I'm going to repurchase my stock because that'll make my stock price go up, right? And remember, debt's always cheaper than equity, okay? But now I have a $109 million shortfall. I'm not done yet. I've got some expensive long-term debt. I've got 2 loans out there at 8.5% interest, and I can borrow money on a 10-year loan at 6.5% interest. But now you've got a $189 million shortfall, and look what you've done to your credit rating, you idiot. Now your credit rating is a C. Why? Because I'm overdrawn $189 million at the end of the year. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in there and I'm going to borrow $200 million, okay? Which we put in as 200,000, okay? Because it's thousands of dollars. When I put in that $200 million bank loan, now that brings my projected cash balance positive, okay? Because I've covered my operating cash shortfall, my financing cash shortfall, and my investing cash shortfall. I had shortfalls in all of those, okay? I've covered all of those. Look at your debt to equity ratio. Last year, it was basically 1.5 to 1. It's 59-41. This year, we're projecting it to be about 2 to 1, 66-34, okay? 66.67, 33.33 would be a 2 to 1 debt equity ratio, okay? My interest coverage ratio, look how much that increased. That's your operating profit divided by your interest expense. I reduced my interest expense, even though I took out a whopping $200 million loan. I reduced my interest expense, okay? And I increased my interest coverage ratio because I increased my earnings, okay? My current ratio gives me a little bit of concern because it went down. And what that simply means is I don't really have enough cash in the bank, right? In the real world, you'd want your current ratio to be about 2.0. This industry is a little bit different. It gets by about 1.4 to 1.6 is perfectly acceptable. And the reason why is you're building units to demand. So you basically have very little inventory. And current ratio is current assets divided by current liabilities. Current assets includes cash, accounts receivable, and inventory. If I have little inventory, that means that my current ratio is going to be a little lower, right? Because we're talking about the numerator in my fraction, it's a little lower, okay? So in this case, I might want to borrow a little more money than just the 200 million. Maybe borrow 210 million, see what that does. Whoops, need an extra zero there. Okay. So by borrowing $210 million, Now I've got $20 million in the bank, which seems sort of reasonable to have 20 million in the bank for a company that's generating 450 million in sales. Doesn't that sort of sound kind of reasonable? Okay. My current ratio went up from 1.42 to 1.44. Okay. Now, here's the magic that I really want to show you. And I know that I'm out of time. It's 9:19. But let's go back to your cost per unit. You remember when I finished tooling my camera and setting it up the way that I wanted to, my costs were at 136. But now, because I've gotten my costs down and I've gotten my demand up, my costs are actually at 132. Remember what my strategy is. It's cost leadership. I have reduced the cost of that camera by $22 in an effort to gain the cost advantage. Right? That's what I'm after. And I'm still making a 4-star camera. On the drone, I've cut my cost by $40 per unit while increasing my quality by 10%. Okay, you see that? My PQ rating went from 4 to 4.4. My cost went from about 757 down to 717. If I'm after the cost advantage, what I've done is I've just taken a huge step in that direction. Okay? Really have taken a huge step in that direction. I may not achieve the cost leadership position. That's a topic for another day. Okay? But I'm making a step in that direction to be the cost leader because I'm investing in the stuff that's going to help me to get my cost down. Okay? And sometimes that's a trade-off as well. You have to make short-term investments for long-term gain, right? I mean, after all, to get those 200 additional workstations in my camera factory and 100 additional workstations in my drone factory, I had to spend $5.5 million in capital investment and an additional $1 million, 1.1 million a year in overhead. Right? But I'm doing that for the long-term payoff. Okay? That's the essence of the cost leadership strategy. Here's what I'm going to do, y'all. I'm going to upload this video to YouTube. Okay? Share the link with you guys. Unfortunately, I'll share it with everybody, even the ones who aren't here. Okay? And it'll be called Implementing the Cost Leadership Strategy. After my 12:30 class, I'll upload that video. It'll be called Implementing the Differentiation Strategy. And I'll share that link with you as well. Okay? All right? We're going back to the office, so if you have questions, concerns, just come on by the office and keep an eye. I'll help you. We'll see y'all on Monday. Good luck with your decisions. Yes, sir. Hey, Caleb.
On the spin gauge,
Yes, sir.
I did the practice test for each chapter, so I
Right.
only got credit for the first two. I didn't get credit for the last.
Did you not take 50 on them?
No, I made above 50.
Oh,
But I
okay.
think the problem
Shoot me a
was,
text. Yeah, shoot me a text.
I think the problem was I did it all from clicking the chapter 2 one,
Uh-huh.
and then I changed the text I was taking to 3. and
okay.
I changed it to 4.
Okay, I'll take a look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll take a look at it. But shoot me a message and remind me, okay?
Dr. Manley, can you look at ours real quick, or you got to go?
I'll go downstairs, but if you want to call me or text me or whatever, we're good. That okay?
Yeah, I'll get a hold of you this evening then.
Okay.